This is TWiT.
Our guest today is Simon Tam. Simon is a Portland musician, record label founder, and former band member of the Stivs, and for the last 11 years, frontman with the Slants, who you may be familiar with from their wonderful tunes and also from the fact that they have been involved in lengthy litigation over their ability to trademark their name, the Slants. And we've been following this case because it's been rattling around in the courts. Simon filed their trademark application, had it declined, and then appealed that to the federal circuit. And the federal circuit found essentially what the Supreme Court found last week, that the PTO should not be making decisions like this on the grounds that it was making them, that the PTO was wading into muddy, muddy waters that impinged on our First Amendment rights of free speech. So we can talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But first, I want to get into this idea of what's disparaging and what's not, and why this was so problematic to have the PTO attempting to struggle with decisions like this, and coming back to Simon with an explanation drawn from the Urban Dictionary and photos of Miley Cyrus. Simon has an op-ed in the New York Times, a Supreme Court decision, Simon, and an op-ed in the New York Times all in the same week. That's a big week right there. And it leads off with an anecdote that is really, really powerful, that explains why you named the band what you did, or how you weren't thinking about this when you were 11. You weren't thinking about what you were going to name the band, but this experience that you had when you were 11 influenced you. Can you tell us, our listeners, about that experience, please?
Sure. This happened actually when I was in junior high school, and I was responsible for cleaning up kind of the sports equipment left over from recess. And so I just kind of stayed back to pick up basketballs, volleyballs, and that sort of thing. I remember having a lot of trouble fitting in at the elementary school and middle school as well, because kids would pick on me for my ethnicity. It didn't really kind of went beyond, people making fun of me until it got kind of violent. And that was the experience that I wrote about. I was hanging back, putting things away, and I didn't notice, but another group of students actually stayed back as well. They kind of hid. I didn't find out till I was pushed to the ground, and then found, sand and dirt being kicked into my eyes, people kicking me in the stomach, all while yelling Jap and Gook over and over again. And I didn't really know what to do until at one point I just finally snapped and I said, I'm a chink. Like, if you're going to be racist, at least do it correctly. Like, that's how stupid you are. You don't even know how to be a racist properly. And they immediately stopped. They left me alone. And I realized there was just a lot of power in claiming an identity and claiming words and saying that you can't use those against me. Those belong to me and my community. And it was something that just stopped people in their tracks. They just were really shocked. And I kind of had similar experiences throughout my life. But the Slants is kind of one of those things that, when I was trying to think of band names, I asked people around me, what's something you think all Asians have in common? And they would almost always say slanted eyes, which I think is really interesting because, first of all, it's not true. Not all Asians have slanted eyes, and Asian people are not the only people on earth with any kind of slant to their eyes. But more importantly, I thought, what a great way to pay homage to the work of Asian American activists who've been using slant in this kind of self-empowering way for decades now. We could really honor their work while talking about our perspective, or our slant on life, if you will, of what it's like to navigate the entertainment industry as people of color. And so it became kind of this badge of pride, like the very same thing that was used against me to cause me shame and embarrassment, and the very thing that caused all that bullying, now all of a sudden was something that I could say, you know what? I shouldn't be ashamed of this, and that other people shouldn't be ashamed of it as well.
Yeah. That story so tore me apart when I read it. Number one, that you had to go through it. Number two, that it happened in San Diego, California, just down the road, basically from where I live. And I think of Southern California as a really culturally diverse and accepting place. And the fact that it happened to you when you were 11, which was not that long ago. You were born in 1981, I believe. So says Wikipedia. So to me, that feels like just how can, the fact that could happen, where it happened and when it happened really rocked me. And really, I think is powerful in telling the story of why you wanted to name the band what you did, both from a business practicality standpoint and from a personal and social health standpoint. From a business practicality standpoint, Mike, that registering a trademark is not something that is divorced from what we do here on the show at all. It's really critical in how people have an online identity as well. It's really critical. For example, the band has the trademark. Well, now they've had the domain, theslants.com. And now that they will be able to have the trademark, that gives that domain much more sticking power, doesn't it?
That's right. I mean, when you have a trademark registration, as Simon was alluding to, you have certain benefits, not only in the marketplace vis-a-vis third parties, but in the eyes of the law. You actually have enhanced benefits that you can take advantage of as a result of having that registration. For example, in any court proceeding where you would go to enforce your trademark rights, if you have a federal registration issued by the government, you can walk into court and that mark is presumed to be valid, meaning that you have preemptive nationwide rights with respect to that trademark registration because the federal government has given it to you. And that's a pretty powerful piece of evidence that one can have when you go into court. You don't have to establish that the mark is valid. So in terms of enforcing trademarks, that's always a real benefit to have. Another benefit that you get with registration is you get certain enforcement benefits. For example, you could take your registration if you were concerned about infringing goods coming in from overseas or elsewhere. You can take that registration and take it to customs, and they can assist you with enforcement efforts. So that's another benefit that the statute provides. I can also tell you from my own personal experience in helping clients that have infringing activities that are taking place online. A lot of big companies that are in the business of providing content and otherwise, they will take a demand much more seriously if you can show that it's being sent on behalf of a client who has a trademark registration or a family of registrations. It's just considered more powerful and more persuasive. So this isn't a theoretical or hypothetical type of situation that Simon was dealing with here. This is really real, real life consequences that are pretty significant when it comes to a federal registration.